The Awakening Protocol. The cold sleep ends. Marcus Kane's eyes snapped open to the sound of sirens. The cryopod's lid hissed as it retracted, releasing a cloud of preservation mist that made him cough violently. His throat felt like sandpaper, and his muscles screamed in protest as he tried to sit up. The emergency lights bathed everything in an angry red glow. "What the hell?" he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. The last thing he remembered was entering cryosleep 3 years ago, expecting to wake up when they reached Kepler 442b. But the ship's chronometer showed they were still 2 years away from their destination. Systems failure. Marcus stumbled out of the pod, his legs shaking like a newborn deer. The cryo bay was eerily quiet except for the steady hum of the remaining pods. Hundreds of his fellow colonists lay in suspended animation, unaware that something had gone terribly wrong. His training kicked in as he made his way to the nearest terminal. The diagnostics made his blood run cold. Life support was operating at 30% capacity. The main reactor was running on emergency power. Most concerning of all, the atmospheric processors were showing critical failures across the board. "Why am I the only one awake?" he wondered aloud, checking the revival protocols. The answer came up on screen. Chief Engineer Marcus Kane had been awakened due to his specialized knowledge of the ship's systems. The AI had determined that manual intervention was required to prevent total system failure. The impossible garden. Marcus grabbed an emergency oxygen tank and made his way through the ship's corridors. The air was thick and hard to breathe, but strangely, it didn't smell like the stale, recycled atmosphere he expected. Instead, there was something almost fresh about it. When he reached the agricultural section, his jaw dropped. The hydroponic gardens weren't just alive, they were thriving beyond anything he'd ever seen. Massive vines covered the walls, their leaves an impossible shade of green that seemed to pulse with inner light. Fruits hung heavy from branches that shouldn't have been able to support their weight. "This is impossible," he breathed, removing his oxygen mask tentatively. The air here was not only breathable but felt cleaner than anything he'd experienced on Earth. The plants seemed to be working overtime, converting carbon dioxide into oxygen at an incredible rate. The mystery deepens. Marcus pulled up the agricultural bay's monitoring systems. The readings were off the charts. The plants were consuming massive amounts of the ship's failing atmosphere and producing pure oxygen in return. But that wasn't the strangest part. The energy readings showed the plants were somehow drawing power directly from the ship's systems, yet the overall energy output was increasing, not decreasing. "The plants are feeding the ship," he realized with growing amazement. But how? He moved deeper into the garden, noting how the vegetation had spread beyond its designated areas. Vines snaked through ventilation shafts, and root systems had somehow penetrated the ship's hull plating. It was as if the entire vessel was being slowly transformed into a living organism. The first clue. As Marcus documented the impossible growth patterns, he noticed something that made his skin crawl. The plants weren't just growing randomly, they were following the ship's power conduits and data cables with surgical precision. It was as if they understood the ship's architecture better than he did. In the central growing chamber, he found the source of the phenomenon. A massive tree-like structure had grown around the ship's main computer core, its roots intertwining with fiber optic cables and power lines. The tree's trunk pulsed with a faint blue light that matched the rhythm of the ship's heartbeat. "You're not just growing," Marcus whispered, reaching out to touch the bark. "You're thinking." The moment his fingers made contact, the tree pulsed brighter, and every screen in the agricultural bay flickered to life. Data streams flowed across the monitors, not ship diagnostics, but something else entirely. Patterns that looked almost like language, but unlike anything in Earth's databases. The revelation. Marcus stumbled backward as the implications hit him. The plants weren't just keeping the ship alive, they were communicating with it. The failing life support systems, the emergency awakening, even his presence here, it was all part of some larger plan. He rushed back to the main computer terminal, his mind racing. If the plants were intelligent, if they were somehow controlling the ship's systems, then everything he thought he knew about their mission was wrong. The question was, were they trying to save the colonists or claim them? As he pulled up the ship's communication logs, Marcus discovered something that made his blood run cold. For the past 6 months, the ship had been receiving a signal from their destination planet. Not a human signal, something else entirely. And the plants had started their impossible growth pattern exactly when those transmissions began. The choice ahead. Marcus stood alone in the garden, surrounded by the impossible green life that had transformed their ship. The emergency sirens had stopped, replaced by a gentle humming that seemed to come from the plants themselves. The ship was no longer dying, it was changing. He had a choice to make. Wake the other senior officers and try to regain control of the ship, or trust in this alien intelligence that had somehow saved them all. But first, he needed to understand what they were really dealing with. Looking at the massive tree that had claimed the ship's heart, Marcus made his decision. He would wake Dr. Victor Reeves, the mission's chief botanist. If anyone could make sense of this biological miracle, it would be him. As he prepared to leave the garden, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The plants swayed gently despite the absence of any breeze, and their leaves seemed to follow his movement. Whatever intelligence had taken residence in their ship, it was aware of his presence. The real question was, what did it want with humanity? The green anomaly. The botanist's awakening. Dr. Victor Reeves felt the familiar sting of revival drugs coursing through his veins as his cryopod opened. Unlike Marcus's emergency awakening, this one was controlled, deliberate. But the sight that greeted him was anything but normal. Marcus Kane stood over him, his face pale with exhaustion and something else, fear. "Victor, thank God you're awake," Marcus said, helping him sit up. "We have a situation that's beyond my expertise." Dr. Reeves had been the lead botanist on 3 previous colony missions. He'd seen plant life adapt to artificial environments, but nothing could have prepared him for what Marcus showed him next. As they walked through the ship's corridors, vines had begun growing along the walls, their leaves glowing with an internal light that pulsed like a heartbeat. "How long have I been out?" Victor asked, running his fingers along a vine that seemed to respond to his touch. 6 hours since I woke you." "But Victor, these changes, they've been happening for months." The impossible biology. When they reached the agricultural section, Victor's scientific mind struggled to process what he was seeing. The hydroponic gardens had transformed into something that defied every law of botany he knew. Plants that should have taken decades to mature were bearing fruit. Vines had grown thick as tree trunks, supporting structures that shouldn't have been possible. "The genetic markers," Victor whispered, pulling out his portable scanner. "These readings can't be right." The scanner showed DNA patterns that were partially familiar, Earth plants, but altered. Sections of genetic code that didn't match anything in their database had been seamlessly integrated into the plant structure. It was as if someone had taken Earth's flora and upgraded it with alien technology. "Look at this," Victor said, pointing to a massive tomato plant that was producing fruit the size of melons. "The cellular structure has been completely reorganized. These plants are operating at impossible efficiency levels. The living network." As Victor studied the plants more closely, he began to notice something that made his skin crawl. The root systems weren't just growing through the ship's infrastructure, they were replacing it. Fiber optic cables had been wrapped in living tissue that pulsed with data transmission. Power conduits were now organic vessels carrying both electricity and some kind of biological energy. "Marcus, look at this," Victor called out, his voice tight with excitement and terror. "The plants aren't just using the ship's systems, they're becoming the ship's systems." He pulled up the biological readings on his tablet. The plants were operating as a single, massive organism. Every leaf, every root, every fruit was connected through a network that spanned the entire vessel. It was like discovering that the ship itself had developed a nervous system. But why? Marcus asked. What's the purpose? Victor's answer came as he analyzed the atmospheric readings. They're not just producing oxygen, Marcus. They're filtering out toxins that our instruments can't even detect. The air in here is cleaner than anything we breathed on Earth. The signal's influence. Deep in the agricultural bay's central chamber, Victor found the source of the transformation. The massive tree that had grown around the ship's computer core was unlike anything in Earth's fossil record. Its bark was smooth and metallic, its leaves seemed to be made of living crystal, and its roots pulsed with electrical activity. This is receiving the signal, Victor realized, watching the patterns of light that flowed through the tree's structure. It's not just a plant, it's a receiver. He connected his equipment to the tree's bioelectrical system and gasped at what he found. The signal from their destination planet wasn't random, it was instructions. Genetic blueprints for transforming Earth's plant life into something new, something that could survive in environments that would kill normal vegetation. The planet we're heading to, Victor said slowly. It's not uninhabited. Something there is preparing for our arrival. The symbiotic truth. As Victor ran more tests, the picture became clearer and more disturbing. The plants weren't just filtering the air, they were analyzing the crew's biological signatures through the ship's life support systems. Every breath they took was being studied, catalogued, and somehow incorporated into the plant network's growing database. They're learning about us, Victor explained to Marcus. Every person in cryosleep is being monitored. The plants are mapping our biological systems, our genetic codes, our metabolic processes. But the most shocking discovery came when Victor tested his own blood. Microscopic plant cells were present in his bloodstream, cells that hadn't been there when he went into cryosleep. The plants weren't just studying the crew, they were slowly integrating with them. We're being changed, Victor whispered. On a cellular level. The plants are making us compatible with whatever ecosystem exists on the destination planet. The growing consciousness. As the hours passed, Victor noticed that the plants were responding to his presence more actively. Vines would move to provide better lighting for his work. Fruits would ripen exactly when he needed to test them. The massive tree's pulsing would synchronize with his heartbeat when he touched its bark. It's not just intelligent, Victor told Marcus. It's empathic. It's learning our emotions, our needs, our fears. The revelation that came next changed everything. Victor discovered that the plant network was capable of accessing the ship's memory banks. It had been studying human history, learning about Earth's ecosystems, understanding the challenges that awaited the colonists on their new world. The dying planet, Victor realized. The reason we left Earth. This intelligence knows about it. It's trying to ensure we don't make the same mistakes again. The difficult choice. As Victor completed his analysis, he found himself facing an impossible decision. The plant network was offering humanity a chance at true symbiosis, a partnership that would allow them to thrive on worlds that would otherwise be uninhabitable. But accepting this partnership would mean giving up their purely human nature. We need to wake Commander Cross, Victor told Marcus. This decision is too big for us to make alone. But as they prepared to leave the agricultural bay, Victor couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The plants were growing more active, more responsive. The ship's transformation was accelerating. Looking back at the massive tree that had claimed the ship's heart, Victor realized that whether they chose to accept the partnership or not, they might not have a choice. The changes had already begun, and there might be no way to reverse them. The question was no longer whether they would reach their destination as humans, but whether humanity as they knew it would survive the journey. The signal in the silence. The commander's revival. Commander Tobias Cross emerged from cryosleep with the practiced efficiency of a career military officer. But even his years of training couldn't prepare him for what greeted him in the revival chamber. The walls were covered in luminescent vines, and the air hummed with an energy that made his teeth ache. "Report," he said simply, though his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Marcus and Victor exchanged glances before Marcus began explaining the situation. As the chief engineer laid out the facts, Cross's expression grew increasingly grim. When Victor added his biological findings, the commander's face went completely pale. "You're telling me that an alien intelligence has taken control of our ship?" Cross asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Not taken control," Victor corrected. "More like, formed a partnership. The plants are keeping us alive, Commander. Without them, we'd all be dead." Cross studied the readings on Victor's tablet, his military mind processing the implications. "And you believe this intelligence is preparing us for something on the destination planet?" The communication attempt. Cross had not survived 20 years in the Colonial Defense Force by accepting situations he couldn't control. His first instinct was to regain command of his ship, but the plant network's integration was too complete. Every system, every circuit, every life support function was now dependent on the alien vegetation. "Show me the signal," Cross ordered. In the ship's communication center, now transformed into a garden of crystal leaf trees, Victor pulled up the transmission data. The signal had been arriving in regular pulses for 6 months, each one containing massive amounts of information encoded in mathematical sequences that defied human understanding. "The AI translation protocols can't make sense of it," Marcus explained. "But the plants understand it perfectly." Cross studied the signal patterns, his tactical mind looking for weaknesses or deception. What he found was something far more complex. The signal wasn't just instructions, it was a conversation. The plant network was responding, sending information back to the source. "It's been reporting our status," Cross realized. "Biological data, ship specifications, crew numbers. Whatever's sending this signal knows everything about us. The hidden truth." Cross ordered a complete review of the ship's logs, searching for any sign of when the alien influence had first begun. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The signal had been detected during their second year of travel, but the ship's AI had been programmed to ignore it. Someone had known this would happen. "Check the Colonial Charter," Cross ordered Victor. "The real one. Classification level Alpha." Victor's hands trembled as he accessed the restricted files. The true purpose of their mission was laid bare in cold, bureaucratic language. Earth's government had known about the alien signal. They had sent the colonists not as explorers, but as test subjects. "We're an experiment," Victor whispered. They wanted to see how humans would react to alien influence. Cross felt a rage building in his chest that he hadn't experienced since the resource wars. His crew, his colonists, had been sent into space as guinea pigs for politicians and scientists who would never face the consequences of their decisions. The ship's transformation. As Cross toured the transformed vessel, the full scope of the changes became clear. The ship wasn't just hosting plant life, it was becoming something entirely new. The hull itself was changing, becoming more organic, more alive. The metal plating had developed a texture that resembled bark, and the corridors pulsed with a rhythm that matched the crew's heartbeats. "The ship is adapting," Marcus explained as they walked through sections that looked more like the interior of a massive tree than a spacecraft. "The plants are reinforcing the hull, improving the life support systems, even enhancing the engines." Victor pulled up the efficiency reports. "We're traveling 20% faster than our original course projection. The plant network has optimized our trajectory." Cross stopped walking, his mind racing. Optimized for what? Speed, or arrival time? The answer came from the ship's navigation system. Their estimated arrival time had been moved up by 6 months. They would reach the destination planet much sooner than planned. The alien perspective. In the ship's central garden, Cross found himself face to face with the massive tree that had claimed the computer core. As he approached, the tree's pulsing intensified, and the screens around the chamber flickered to life. For the first time, they were seeing the signal not as raw data, but as the plant network interpreted it. Images flowed across the screens, a dying world, its atmosphere poisoned, its oceans acidic. But then the images changed, showing the same world transformed, thriving with life that seemed to merge technology and biology seamlessly. "It's showing us the destination planet," Victor breathed. "Before and after." Cross studied the images with a strategist's eye. The before pictures showed a world that had suffered the same fate as Earth: environmental collapse, resource depletion, the slow death of an ecosystem. But the after images showed something remarkable: a world reborn through the partnership of native intelligence and alien visitors. "They're not invaders," Cross realized. "They're gardeners. They've done this before." The moral choice. As more images flowed across the screens, Cross saw the pattern. World after world, species after species, all facing the same choice humanity now faced. Accept the partnership and thrive, or reject it and face extinction. "How many species have they helped?" Cross asked. The tree pulsed, and numbers appeared on the screens. Hundreds of civilizations across the galaxy, all facing environmental collapse, all offered the same choice. Most had accepted. Those that hadn't, the images showed empty worlds, dead cities, the remains of civilizations that had chosen to remain pure rather than adapt. "The Colonial Defense Force would call this biological warfare," Cross said quietly. "Forced evolution." "But is it?" Victor asked. "Look at the air quality readings. Look at the crew's health monitors. We're not being harmed, we're being improved." Cross knew Victor was right. The crew members in cryosleep were showing enhanced immune systems, improved cellular repair, increased resistance to radiation. The plant network wasn't just keeping them alive, it was making them better. The commander's decision. Cross faced the hardest decision of his career. He could try to fight the plant network, attempt to purge the alien influence from his ship. But doing so would almost certainly kill everyone aboard. The life support systems were too integrated, too dependent on the plant's intervention. Or he could accept the partnership and lead his people into an uncertain future as something more than human. "Sir?" Marcus asked, seeing the conflict in his commander's eyes. Cross looked around the garden that had once been his bridge. The plants swayed gently, their leaves rustling with a sound like whispered promises. The screens showed images of the destination planet, a world that could be paradise or prison, depending on the choices they made. "Wake Lieutenant Pierce," Cross ordered. "We need to understand the security implications of this partnership before we make our final decision." As Cross prepared to leave the garden, he felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He wasn't just commanding a ship anymore, he was leading humanity into its next evolutionary step. The question was, would they emerge as conquerors or as partners in something greater than themselves? The living ship. The security chief's awakening. Lieutenant Nathan Pierce had been the youngest security chief in Colonial Defense Force history, earning his position through a combination of tactical brilliance and an uncanny ability to identify threats before they materialized. But nothing in his training had prepared him for the sight that greeted him as his cryopod opened. The security bay, once a sterile chamber filled with weapons and monitoring equipment, had been transformed into something that looked like the inside of a living organism. Vines pulsed with electric current, and what had once been metal walls now breathed with organic rhythm. "Lieutenant Pierce, thank you for joining us," Commander Cross said, his voice carrying the strain of command under impossible circumstances. Pierce's hand instinctively moved to where his sidearm should have been, but found only empty air. "Sir, what's the tactical situation?" "That's what we need you to determine," Cross replied grimly. The merged reality. As Pierce toured the ship with the others, his security-trained eyes picked up details that the scientists had missed. The plant network hadn't just grown throughout the ship, it had strategically positioned itself to control every critical system. Access panels were wrapped in vines that would have to be cut to reach vital components. Security corridors were blocked by massive root systems that seemed to pulse with awareness. It's not just integration, Pierce realized. It's occupation. The plant network has positioned itself to control every aspect of the ship's operation. But as he studied the defensive positions, Pierce noticed something that made his skin crawl. The plants weren't just controlling the ship, they were controlling access to the crew. Every cryopod was surrounded by a network of hair-thin vines that pulsed with the same rhythm as the sleepers' heartbeats. "Commander," Pierce said quietly, "I need to check something." The biological monitoring. In the medical bay, Pierce found equipment that had been transformed beyond recognition. The diagnostic machines were now living organisms, their screens replaced by leaves that displayed medical data in patterns of light and color. But the readings they showed were impossible. "The crew isn't just being monitored," Pierce reported. "They're being modified. Every person in cryosleep is undergoing cellular changes at the genetic level." Victor pulled up the medical records. "The modifications are beneficial, Lieutenant. Enhanced immune systems, improved radiation resistance, increased cellular repair capacity." "But are they reversible?" Pierce asked. The silence that followed was answer enough. Pierce accessed the ship's security protocols, finding that most of the defensive systems were now controlled by the plant network. The weapons systems had been powered down, the security doors could only be opened with the plant's cooperation, and the communication systems were broadcasting on frequencies that human equipment couldn't detect. "We're not passengers anymore," Pierce concluded. "We're cargo." The evolutionary imperative. As Pierce studied the ship's transformation, he began to understand the alien intelligence's strategy. This wasn't an invasion, it was an evolutionary process. The plant network was preparing humanity for life on a world that would be hostile to their current biological form. "Look at these atmospheric readings from the destination planet," Pierce said, pulling up the environmental data. "The air is toxic to humans. The radiation levels would kill us within hours. But with the modifications the plants are making, we could survive," Victor finished. "More than survive, we could thrive." Pierce studied the genetic modifications more closely. The changes weren't random, they were specifically designed to allow humans to process the alien atmosphere, to withstand the radiation, to integrate with the planet's existing ecosystem. "It's not just changing us," Pierce realized. "It's making us compatible with itself." The hidden agenda. Pierce's investigation revealed something that made the others uncomfortable. The plant network wasn't just preparing them for the destination planet, it was preparing them to be its partners in transforming that world. The genetic modifications would allow humans to interface directly with the plant network, to become part of its consciousness. "We're being recruited," Pierce explained. "This intelligence doesn't want slaves or victims. It wants partners in its mission to transform worlds." But Pierce's security training made him suspicious of any agenda that required such fundamental changes to human nature. He accessed the ship's long-range sensors, searching for any sign of what awaited them at their destination. What he found changed everything. The fleet in waiting. The destination planet wasn't uninhabited. Pierce's enhanced sensor readings revealed a vast network of ships in orbit around the world, vessels from dozens of different civilizations, all transformed by the same plant network that was changing their own ship. "It's a collection," Pierce said, his voice tight with realization. "Every species that accepts the partnership becomes part of a larger collective. We're not colonizing a new world, we're joining an existing civilization." Commander Cross studied the sensor data with growing unease. "How many ships?" "Thousands," Pierce replied. "Representing hundreds of different species. All transformed, all integrated into the plant network." The implications were staggering. The alien intelligence wasn't just transforming individual species, it was building a galaxy-spanning civilization based on biological integration and symbiotic partnership. The point of no return. As Pierce continued his investigation, he discovered that the ship's transformation was accelerating. The plant network was no longer just influencing the crew, it was replacing their technology entirely. The navigation systems were now controlled by tree-like organisms that somehow understood quantum mechanics. The life support systems were living entities that breathed with the ship's rhythm. "Commander," Pierce reported, "I don't think we can reverse this process even if we wanted to. The ship is no longer a machine, it's a living organism." To prove his point, Pierce attempted to access the ship's original computer core. What he found was a biological processor that pulsed with thoughts too complex for human understanding. The machine intelligence that had once controlled their ship had been absorbed into something far greater. The AI is still there, Pierce realized. But it's not artificial anymore. It's part of the plant network, thinking thoughts that span multiple species and worlds. The final choice. Pierce's security analysis led to an inescapable conclusion. The ship could no longer function without the plant network. The crew could no longer survive without the genetic modifications. They had passed the point of no return. "We have 3 options," Pierce reported to Commander Cross. "Accept the partnership and join the Galactic Collective. Try to fight it and die in the process. Or find a way to escape before the transformation is complete." "Is escape possible?" Cross asked. Pierce studied the ship's systems one final time. The escape pods had been transformed into organic cocoons. The communication systems only responded to the plant network's frequencies. Even the ship's hull had changed, becoming something that could survive in deep space without technological support. "No, sir," Pierce said quietly. "We're committed to this path now. The only choice left is whether we embrace it or resist it." As Pierce finished his report, he felt the weight of humanity's future pressing down on him. They stood at the threshold of becoming something new, something that had never existed before in human history. The question was, would they step through that threshold as willing participants or unwilling victims? Commander Cross looked around at his transformed ship, at his changing crew, at the impossible choice that lay before them. The final decision would have to be made soon. Time was running out, and the destination planet was calling.